Hello, everybody. Kikumon here. Hope you all had a good Christmas. My Christmas was okay. Could be better. Could be worse. With that said, welcome to Talk Story Thursday, Veterans and Christmas Part 2. I actually created a outline this time, so this talk story might be a bit more fluid and controlled. So, as the Beatles famously do, let's rock and roll. So, let me just give a recap of last week's talk story. We had spoken about Christmas and the holidays, how it can affect veterans, specifically combat veterans, emotionally, socially, and behaviorally. And how you can talk with them or kind of ease them into it as far as doing a pulse check and seeing if they're doing okay. I shared a little bit about how my Christmas was when I was overseas, um, with the whole Burger King thing, the chicken sandwich, the PX, and how that felt in comparison to my first Christmas returning and how it was much different. And then I had mentioned about some tall tale signs of identifying if a veteran is being impacted, especially with the Christmas holidays where they don't have a um, like a support system or a battle buddy, and how you can assist them or check in with them. And then the internal conflicts that they may have with Christmas in seeing other people with family, significant others, partners, children, and then they may be isolating or kind of staying to themselves, and just being stoic and not caring about how other people felt about them. So now let's get into part two, where I'm going to explain a little bit more about the different environments, the transitions, other types of recovery methods, side effects of some of the recovery methods, socialization and isolation, non family or non familiar or friendly support system, and then close it out. So, in talking about the emotional aspect of Christmas, as I shared last time, it can bring out a lot of emotion: happiness, sadness, anger, frustration, anxiety, depending on how the person is coping with it or trying to move forward from it. All depends on their threshold of accepting it, or the opposite, denial of it. So we'll hit the emotional side of it. Um, so I'll give an example. For Christmas, as I mentioned before, I'm not the typical veteran, married with children, middle age to older, settled down, everything. So with Christmas, it's all about family. I'm fortunate I have my parents, I have my sister, her kids, nieces and nephews, and I can always say, oh, I spend time with them. It's great. But there's the other side of it too, where there's the relational side of spending time with a loved one, like a partner, spouse, even having your own like children, and bringing the joy of Christmas to children. For some veterans, because of their emotional detachment, that may never happen for them at the moment. It may take them, years down the line, or just it was never meant to be. Sometimes that will really affect a veteran or just a person in general. And it's both traumatizing and almost feels like it's self sabotage, because you're degrading yourself because you don't have that type of life. Kind of to add to it, on the social aspect, they may actually isolate more, or they will communicate more with like people, other veterans, their battle buddies, maybe even siblings of veterans or direct relatives of veterans. Because there's that likeness, it's easier for them to communicate with them and convey what they're trying to express emotionally, behaviorally. Whereas you need to explain in more detail to a civilian or a non military person, or someone that has no attachment to a veteran or a military person. And that in itself is conflicting and can be a huge barrier for veterans to just shut off or not even want to continue the conversation because they see it as going nowhere. And then lastly, for that, it's the behavioral side. So for the different branches, they were trained differently. I can speak with the army, we have certain mannerisms that you can tell that, oh, yeah, that's definitely an army person. And then there's some mannerisms that, oh, that's doesn't look like it was from the army or something even close to the army. But fellow army soldiers can tell, veterans can tell. It's that innate ability, for lack of a better word, that they can see it and they can feel it. So, in thinking of the emotional, social, and behavioral side of it, let's look at the effects. So, on the military environment, it's hardcore, emotionally stoic, train, 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 shoot to kill, complete mission. Bottom line, there's no in between. It's just that. On the civilian side, you can't just train, train, train because there's all these rules and protections. Not saying that we weren't protected in the army, it's a different kind of training and protection. It's a little bit more harsher than the civilian environment. And that's why military folks are hardcore and they're stoic because that's how they were taught. The moment you have to think is pretty much the moment that you could die. So, on the military side, going into country, in the beginning, I didn't know really how to feel. I had a lot of mixed emotions. I was still young. I was still in that party mode, like I'm invincible. It is what it is. You only live once. But when I saw the first mortars coming in, hearing the first rifle shots, oh, I had to quickly change. Quickly change. And quickly change to a point where people would ask me, oh, why aren't you feeling this way? Or do you even know what emotions are? And I would tell them, well, I know what emotions are, but I just can't really act on it now because my first instinct is survival. And the moment that you have to think is the moment you're gonna die. And because we're there for a year, it's easy for us to adapt into that same behavior the whole time through. And when you were to act like that in the civilian side, immediately people will think, wow, this guy's heartless. What the heck's wrong with him? Oh, I think he's a hazard. You know what? I don't think he's safe for us. We don't know if he's gonna go postal and all these other stigmas and quote unquote phrases of a combat veteran integrating into the civilian workforce or environment. And usually in the civilian side, you don't have to worry about not having to think or feel in order to react, because it's not like you're going to get shot every day. It's not like you're going to get mortared every day. It's not like you're going to have to go out the wire and avoid IEDs every day. So, just like anything else, humans adapt. So, we adapt to it. And that's where the conflict is between the civilian side and the military side. We're trained to survive. Civilians typically get trained just to get by. And then with that, we'll go into transition. So again, taking the example of a war-proven soldier returning to the States, and now he has to transition from a really hostile work environment where his life is at stake every single day, every minute, to a not so hostile work environment, not having to worry that his life is at stake every minute, every day. And how will he do that after he's been there for a year and it's ingrained like muscle memory? Now he's in a cush office job. How is he going to act? So let's touch on the psychological. So, psychological meaning non medicinal or non pharmacopsychological. We're looking at strictly psychological. So, again, you're coming from being alert 24/7 to not having to be alert 24/7. It's a transition, it's a shift. Just to give a metaphorical example, you have a car that has a turbo on it. You turn on the car, turbo's on the whole time. Turbo is running that engine much higher and much faster than it was without turbo, like an engine on steroids. And it's all the time. It's not just you press a button and bam, it'll do that. It's on 24/7. So think of a soldier like that coming back. His mind is like the turbo, it's on. It's just going, going, going. It's making its heart race, making his body tense, making his eyes look all over. So you can't expect him to immediately calm down and just relax. Oh no. Does a turbo do that? No, it keeps going. No matter what environment it is, it keeps going. So if you take out the turbo, the engine is regular. It's how it was, stock, and it's all good. So if you can take the turbo out of this veteran that's transitioning back to civilian life, they'll be much calmer. They'll be able to focus and relax, and they'll be able to continue and adapt and mold themselves back into their society or their environment. But how do you do that? Well, there's cognitive behavioral therapy where you do something like this talk story with a therapist, a licensed therapist, psychologist, social worker, mental health counselor, and figure out what's going on and what do they need to address. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it has to be coupled with pharmacopsychological treatment, which brings us to the psychiatric side of it. So anytime you hear psychiatric, you think, oh, you're going to see a shrink, you're going to get meds, you're going to go into the loony bin, pretty much. And not all medicines will work. Folks have taken every single antidepressant available and it still doesn't work. Or they have to take two different ones at the same time just to get a resolution. Or sometimes it doesn't work. They may have to take three different types. Still doesn't work. So what do? You have to outweigh the risk to the benefits. So if you have to take a antidepressant to help with your mood, and then you have to take another antidepressant to maybe mitigate some sexual dysfunction, and then maybe you have to take another antidepressant to decrease your heart palpitations because it's making your heart race just you know out of the blue. Then that's three different types of chemicals that you're putting into your body just to address that one issue of depression. Most times it'll help. But again, you're taking three different types of medicine just to address one thing when it should be a one for one. You take one medicine to address this and that's it. It shouldn't have any other effect besides helping you address this issue. So more often than not, with medication, it may make things worse than better. So that's when you need to outweigh the risks, maybe combine cognitive behavioral therapy with medication, or there may be additional barriers that's that makes you not able to cope because of a side effect of the medicine. And so most times you'll see a medicine list of 10 or 12 medications for a veteran, and the main thing is depression, PTSD, anxiety. But he has a cocktail medications. It's one to offset the other, to offset the other, to offset the other. And even with that, it could add additional barriers, such as being more stoic, emotionally numb. And that may not help with the recovery process of it. Now, from that, we're now taking it to socialization and isolation. So, again, with the holidays, it's a time of giving, it's a time of hanging out, spending time with family, friends, just having a good time together. So, again, there's the two sides, there's the socialization side and the isolation side. Socialization, the veteran is talking story with people, out engaging, trying to make the best of it. They have a support system. Could be their battle buddies, could be their friends, whether they're civilian or military friends, their family, which could include like a spouse or their partner, their children, siblings, their parents, or other close relatives like cousins. And then on the opposite end, with the isolation, because they don't have a support system, they tend to self medicate and isolate. Or because they fear their actions in public may not be accepted, they decide the best way is to stay in, away from public so nobody sees them. Out of sight, out of mind. Going back to the socialization side, there's also the non family or non friendly support system, which I group as general peer groups, VA or vet centers, um, non covered services, meaning community care, anything that's non VA covered, um, or self medicating and pure isolation, where they find their own way of coping, whether it's alcohol, illicit drugs, a cocktail of both, or even taking supplements that is banned in where they live. Nothing regulated. So taking that with the holidays, if you notice that veterans are socializing, they're enjoying Christmas, then that's great. You know that they have a solid support system. They have people that they trust and they can confide in, and they're moving forward in their recovery. If you notice veterans that are more isolated, it doesn't show that they have a good support system. They don't have other veterans that they can talk to or a peer group that they can relate to. Then the hope is they can find someone that they trust to get them into a peer group or to receive some kind of services, whether it's at a church with other veterans, reuniting with family, getting them into a social circle, and taking them away from any self harm or self medicating or pure isolation. So, to close part two, uh, I will share with you how my Christmas went. So, as I mentioned, I have my parents, my sister, them, nieces and nephews. And like I said, I am not the typical, married with kids, older white male military dude. So with this Christmas, it was a bit hard for me. One, because we've been having excessive fireworks and it's at random times. So it, of course, it alerts me. And then what added to it was the smell. And I could smell like the gunpowder ish, the the burn, the fuse smell. Some of it smelled like burnt hair. And with the burnt hair, it immediately took me back, what, 19 years? Just thinking back of when I was in Iraq, nearing all the burn pits, seeing the bodies sprawled, and then navigating through. And it hit me really hard. Not only with that, but there were other compounding factors that had additionally hit me that I should have expected, but I didn't want to believe it, even though it's been told to me numerous times. I just put a deaf ear to it. And then when I really got the news, that compounded it. So it was just a flurry of emotions all in one swoop: anger, anxiety, sadness, disappointment, frustration, physical pain, nervousness. And then I questioned myself, why? Why all of this all one time? Why now? And then the second question was, why me? What is it worth? And fortunately, things got better that evening. I was able to get through it. Of course, I needed to talk to somebody about it, but I was able to kind of get through it and then continue on with, you know, the next day and then, today. And now this was like 19 years ago when I was having these issues and conflicting feelings, and I was taught stuff to help me cope with it. But just in a matter of seconds, all of it was forgotten and I didn't know what to do. I just froze and almost had a plan, but didn't fulfill it. So, to lighten this story, um, everything's better. Again, as I said, I was able to talk story with people, um, kind of redirect myself, refocus, and move forward. And with that said, this is part two of Christmas and veterans. Next week, I will do one on New Year's, of course. And this one might be a bit more detailed only because of the key component that affects a lot of veterans, which is fireworks. Thank you very much for your time, and we will talk story next time.